Video games started out with the goal of creating an experience gamers could have in short bursts in exchange for quarters. Arcades were fast-paced light shows that displayed 8-bit or sprite characters on the run with no real goal or characterization other than to get to the next screen or save the princess. The concept of spending hours in an arcade was a novel one unless you happen to have enough change saved up to last you the entire day. When video games came home, experiences that gamers would have would begin to be measured in hours rather than minutes. Goals were becoming more lofty and would require longer and longer periods at the controls, with intense moments such as boss fights or increasingly difficult areas acting as benchmarks to show you just how much closer you were to getting to the endgame. With that in mind, the respite that gamers would take in between those levels that made us lean forward in our chairs and grip our controllers tighter became that much more important. What started as spinning that sign at the end of a course in Sonic the Hedgehog or sliding down a flagpole in a side-scrolling Mario game would evolve. End-of-level results screens or loading screens would act as brief gaps in between gameplay to let us catch our collective breaths. But the desire to give players a more expansive world and environment with depth and intrigue that mirrored the complex narratives and characters that were now being introduced into this new art form would lead to the birth of an aspect of gaming that we may not talk about a whole lot, but is definitely one that we have a great love for. When we loosen the grip on our sweaty controllers and lean back in our sick gamer chairs after a particularly crazy challenge, and our characters enter their safe haven. They go by many names and may serve different functions both logistically and narratively, but these locations, despite how they may be portrayed by the game's art style, are as cozy and warm as our childhood homes. Hub worlds between levels, areas where we can level up our characters, home bases to store and load up equipment, or just areas where we feel safe from all the terrors that our graphics cards can render without dying. Video game safe havens are important, and it can be kind of strange to really discuss that importance. The appeal of a video game is the promise of activity. When we get home from work, we just want to kick back, grab a drink and some snacks, and do something fun. Whether you're slaying dragons or catching passes, there are aspects of actual interactivity and the feel of that interactivity that are worth celebrating. So it's funny to sit down, write, and film a video about the part of a game where you really aren't called to do anything that particularly exciting. Obviously, this fact varies from title to title, and some of these checkpoints, bases, villages, and hubs are safer than others, but there are elements that some, if not all of these levels have in common that make them such a standout part of the gaming experience. Firstly, there are hub worlds, places that act as go-betweens for different levels where the threat of any kind of attack is virtually non-existent. I'm sure that upon just hearing the term hub world, the vast majority of you immediately thought of the Nintendo 64 classic, Super Mario 64. Peach's Castle cemented many of the elements that would define later hub areas. Being able to enter levels through the unlocking of different areas of the castle, and the paintings on the wall giving hints to the kind of worlds that Mario will jump around in. Despite being over 20 years old, Peach's Castle is still such an effective hub because it feels like a reward every single time you beat a boss, collect the red coins, or race down a slide to collect the star power and leap out of the painting triumphantly. Mario wiping the sweat from his brow as the peaceful atmosphere of the Grand Castle comes back. This is particularly effective after traversing some of the more fiery landscapes in the game. Darker areas with tougher challenges only make us miss that serene peace of Peach's Castle even more. A word you're going to hear me use often in this video is atmosphere. It's an essential element that makes a hub world like this stand the test of time. Though the 64-bit graphics obviously have aged quite a bit, I think a lot of games from this era have cultivated a unique feeling that comes from their bright color palettes and pointy character designs. In a game with so many worlds to explore and surprises around every corner, the familiarity that comes with returning to the castle just feels like home. With that said, the castle does have some secrets of its own. Peach's Castle inspired many of the games of its era and many subsequent Mario entries that came after. The observatories and Isle Delfino wouldn't exist without Peach's Castle. These kinds of locations in Mario games act as a way to transition to the next area, but as this gaming trope would evolve, there would be more emphasis on mechanical function. Ways to upgrade your character would become incorporated in different ways, such as shops or access to an upgrade system. Online functions are often accessed through these kinds of areas as well. What started out as a clever way to load in different levels rather than just selecting them from a map became scenic locations that not only helped the player progress by returning to upgrade or shop, but also to expand the game's world by populating them with characters and bits of lore for the player to discover. While Mario 64 would influence the rest of the Mario series with locations like the observatories in Mario Galaxy or Delfino Plaza in Mario Sunshine, the Legend of Zelda series would incorporate the idea of peaceful towns and villages into nearly every game in the series. Starting with A Link to the Past, Kakariko Village has become an essential location in almost every single mainline Zelda game. What makes Kakariko Village work so well is not just its comforting atmosphere, but the fact that you often have to travel to it to experience it. The roads and dungeons of Hyrule are treacherous, so when you see that village in the distance, it creates a feeling of calm when you know that inside the borders of that town, it's safe. This also hits even harder for me personally in the Zelda game with probably the strangest style and tone, Majora's Mask, where you become very familiar with Clock Town. This applies to many other examples of villages, towns, or slums in other games. Areas that don't often require too much of you, but offer so much in the way of side quests, character interactions that grant levity from an otherwise oppressive atmosphere, the ability to enter shops to purchase or sell items, and to talk with NPCs that offer upgrades. After interacting with these worlds in this way, these places can feel like home, and they're designed to. Concept artists, writers, and voice actors all come together to craft that sensation. While it's important to recognize and celebrate the safe spaces that were expertly designed, modeled, and programmed to give us that sweet sense of homey atmosphere, it's just as important to acknowledge the games that give control over that atmosphere to the players. Customizable home-based locations in sandbox-type games or RPGs have become just as popular as some of the more scripted efforts in recent years. Giving players the tools they need to build up their own safe space can create a more personal connection to the game that will make us come back and play them years later. There's an entire cozy farm village game genre out there that rests entirely on how much freedom is given to the player to design their own house, farm, restaurant, whatever. While these games are designed to be relaxing, games like Terraria or the survival mode in Minecraft give gamers control over the respite that they so desperately need after being nearly blown apart by creepers in a dingy-ass mine. Simply crafting a place to store your items and build a bed to respawn at has blossomed into a damn art form online. Some of the houses that I've seen built in Minecraft over the years have absolutely blown my mind, so much so that I've tried my best to create my own Mojo Dojo Casa house here for you in this video, and as you can see, I've pretty much mastered that concept. Whether it's your house in Minecraft, your farm in Stardew Valley, or your base in the Phantom Pain, the developers were aware that by having these customizable options available, that a player would fill their own world with what makes them feel the most safe. As a bonus, some of the cool items that you fill these bases with, you can only attain through certain challenges in the game. Therefore, not only do these places fulfill a cool aesthetic need, they also act as a visual sign of progression in the actual game itself. In a complete 180 from the genres that emphasize comfort and a more peaceful atmosphere, I think it's time to highlight the genre that gave safe havens their name. In what gaming genre is safety most important? And more often than not, the entire goal. Just getting to that area to heal, to rest, to craft, to survive. Survival horror is all about delving into a world of terror where anything and everything is out to kill you, equipped only with the often scant resources that the game allows you to have. When you're down to your last few bullets or healing herbs, your melee weapon is soon to break, and an army of nightmare creatures trails closely behind you, there is nothing that can quite compare to the wash of relief that comes over you when you find the safe room. A room where, whether it makes sense within the universe or not, enemies will not enter and you're free to catch your breath, heal up, and most importantly, save your progress. Because death awaits when you cross that threshold again, and nobody wants to start back further than they need to. Who would I be if I were to make a section on survival horror safe rooms without rightfully giving credit to the series that revolutionized both survival horror and the safe room? Let's talk
Resident Evil.
The genre-defining classic introduced many elements that would become mainstays for the rest of the series, as well as the games that it inspired. Taking place in the spookiest mansion that pre-rendered backgrounds could conjure, there were potential threats and surprises around every corner and in every new room. Though often lamented by many, the slowly opening door animations acted as a gasp of anticipation before tossing the player into a new challenge, adding to the suspense of not knowing what was on the other side, and making the relief of it being one of the typewriter rooms that much more palpable. Tucking the typewriters away in these locations made finding them feel amazing. It also adds this sort of risk and reward system to the gameplay, with the player having to choose whether to risk making progress on a particularly difficult puzzle and hoping to find another safe room, or continually returning to the room that you're familiar with. Pair that with the typewriter ribbons limiting the amount of times you can actually save in that first game, and you've got a very interesting save system, one defined by its starkly peaceful presentation in an otherwise eerie setting, especially in the original Resident Evil's phenomenal GameCube remake, where those environments were made all the more dark and unsettling to contrast the warmth of the safe room. Typewriter safe rooms would become a tradition in the Resident Evil series, continuing in the second game and its amazing remake all the way to the newer games, like the horrifying southern nightmare that is Resident Evil 7. The more immersive first-person perspective of that game making the parked trailer outside the dilapidated house feel like that much more of a relief to run away to. With a greater emphasis on action and gunplay, RE games like 4 and Village would add characters that would sell you weapons and healing items near the safe areas. One of my favorite parts of playing 4 and its, again, amazing remake is how they added these really cool torches with purple flames to signify a typewriter location. Seeing these torches, especially when suplexing and kicking my way through the harder difficulties, gave me that comfort that I desire from any safe haven. By spreading out these safe rooms like this, horror and horror-adjacent games took the concept of the checkpoint in a classic side-scroller and ramped it way up. The urgency of getting to safe houses playing Left 4 Dead with my brothers are cherished memories that I still laugh about today. While technically not 100% safe, I will mention that the checkpoint system in Alien Isolation is one that I love. It's amazing to see one after sneaking around, but you risk saving and finding yourself in a loop of infinite death if you didn't check if the alien was around before you saved. There's one more thing about a safe room or location that not only applies to horror games, but really to any genre that is probably the most crucial element to selling that comforting feeling that is desired from these areas. It's that final touch that creates that response in our brains, telling us that in this spot right here, we're okay. It's the music. What makes safe haven music some of the most popular amongst gaming soundtrack enthusiasts like myself is often that strong juxtaposition from the other tracks. They stand out in one way or another. If Bowser's Road is intense and percussive, then Inside the Castle Walls must be joyful, with a certain sense of regal magic to it. These are the tracks that we get to these places just to hear again, and hearing them in our free time relaxes us. In some cases, the music itself serves a function in the game, with a theme that carries into each safe haven. Just another way to let you know that you're okay for now. There are tons of examples, and I'm sure you'll recognize many of them, as well as leave your favorites in the comments, but what's important is that they just fit the intended vibe so well. bring it all home, I think I want to talk about the games from one specific developer. Some of you have probably been waiting for me to bring them up this entire time. Like Resident Evil, they need their own specific section.
If you require rest, now is the time. That is, after all, what the bonfire is for.
The Bonfires of the Souls series, the Lamps of Bloodborne, the Sights of Grace in Elden Ring. From Software just does it so well. Running through an area like Blighttown or Caelid on your last flask with no end in sight, only to be met with the ethereal glow and sound effects of a waiting bonfire, is what FromSoft Games are all about. The difficulty from a FromSoft game makes finding these checkpoints so rewarding because they perform all of the functions I've mentioned previously. You can upgrade your stats and refill your healing items and HP at any of these locations. There are also merchants or other characters that hang around these places that you can interact with. Finding a bonfire out on your adventure is always a feeling of true relief, but every FromSoft game also has that one special area, that one hub, safe haven, home base, whatever you want to call it. Areas that not only bring characters from all over the game's world together, offer purchasing of items and upgrades, and feature online modes, but also have that special feeling of warmth in an otherwise cold world. Majula in Dark Souls 2 is probably the most beautiful to look at of the Dark Souls trilogy, with a gorgeous sunset over the rolling ocean waves. The Hunter's Dream in Bloodborne is drenched in the game's perfect gothic Lovecraftian aesthetic. The Round Table Hold in Elden Ring has this regal, ancient energy to it. And then there's the entire reason I even made this video. In my opinion, the best safe haven in any video game. The true magic of Firelink Shrine in the very first Dark Souls is not felt the first time you arrive, or at least it wasn't for me. When that giant crow drops off the player character from the Undead Asylum, Firelink offers many different paths to choose from. A few characters to chat with, or, well, not chat with yet, and a spot to make your first upgrades and start building your character. From this point, as a first-time player, you will make your way through different challenging areas with enemy mobs that you're not strong enough to ignore yet, bosses that you've still got to get a read on, and more areas that seem like roadblocks designed for you to just give up. I remember the first time I made my way through the Undead Burg. How embarrassingly long it took me to get the mechanics of the combat down and find my way to the first Bell of Awakening. Like so many others, I died countless times and lost so many precious souls. Eventually, I entered into the tower that housed one of the two Bells of Awakening, and after struggling with this giant knight dude, I decided to check out this elevator, not knowing where it would lead. I rode down and was met with the text displaying Firelink Shrine and this music. What I specifically love about the theme of Firelink is that when arriving back, you rarely catch it playing from the beginning. It fades in and fades out as you get closer to the center, like the music comes from the bonfire itself, forever playing. The music, like the central flame, is eternal. For many, this moment when you find your first shortcut back to Firelink is when Dark Souls began to click. For me, Firelink Shrine does not just represent everything that I love about a video game safe haven, it represents the message of Dark Souls. This one area proved to me that Dark Souls wasn't just a troll game designed to make me quit with unfair difficulty spikes, lakes of poison, and ghosts that can hit you through walls. Lordran is filled with things that will make you want to give up, to do as all of the other undead have done and go hollow. But at the center of all of that challenge is Firelink Shrine. Glowing phantoms of other players online will appear at that bonfire, resting right beside you. They are on the same journey. Though their overall weapons and armor set may be different than yours, they are still going. They're not quitting. Firelink is an area that, with all of its interesting side characters, relaxing music, and vantage points that allow you to see into the future of the world that you will soon explore, is telling you to rest, regain your strength, and get back out there. There is so much more for you to see, but you can rest at this bonfire until you're ready to see it. And that really is kind of the unifying feeling that makes the greatest of all safe havens in gaming. These are the settings that either mechanically or emotionally we want to return to, but never to stay. There's an adventure to be had beyond the borders of these locations, and like life, we have to leave our comfort zones to truly experience the greatness these worlds have to offer. There's a message relayed to the players from safe havens that isn't always communicated verbally, but felt. That message being to ready up, jump back into that painting, head back into the mine, step through that door, and leave the warmth of the fire to continue your journey prepared. Prepared to just keep going. Even if I were to make this video hours long, I'm sure that I wouldn't be able to mention every single great example of video game safe havens. What makes these places feel special to us is that we personally connect with each of them. So I ask you, what is your favorite safe room, hub world, or game with this type of location? Tell me all about it in the comments. I want to thank you again for watching another one of my videos. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing if you'd like to be notified when the next video releases. I've got a Patreon, I've got a Twitter, but most importantly, I've got a pretty amazing audience that supports what I do that is growing every single day. It's just nuts how close I am to 10,000 subscribers now. I seriously never thought anybody outside of my family or friends would be interested in anything that I make, but a lot of you seem to be, so thank you so much. We're coming up on October now, and I'm very excited for you to see what I have in store for spooky season. So, till then, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.